All right, familiar face coming back to the Houston Texans. Jacob Martin is coming back to town. I got 5 thoughts about this, including one major wish that I hope comes true. Let's talk about it in the locker room, the number one source for Texans daily digital content.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk.
All right, so 5 thoughts about Jacob Martin re-signing with the Houston Texans, coming back in town. We heard from Aaron Wilson a week ago that the Texans were hosting him. Ian Rappaport broke the news on this when he was the first one with it. 5 thoughts about this whole thing, starting at number 1. We remember Jacob Martin from his 3 years here in Houston, 10.5 sacks in 3 years. A disaster in the run game. He was a guy who was best equipped to just coming off the edge and rushing the quarterback. That was it. As soon as he had to, I mean, if you look at some of the lowlights of Jacob Martin, you can go to the Kansas City game and all that. There were some really bad memories. He's best equipped. Get after the quarterback, use your athleticism, use your effort, and contribute in other ways. He's definitely not someone you want on the field for 3 downs, but there were some times where there were some spark plays for Jacob Martin, and he always did a little bit extra afterwards with the Rock Boys bit, which we'll get to in just a sec. A second thought on the signing of Jacob Martin is, how does he fit in here when it comes to the system? After his departure from the Texans, he signed a 3-year, $13.5 million deal with the Jets. Jets punted on that 8 games in. So 8 games into that thing, the Jets traded Jacob Martin to the Denver Broncos, and they just said bye-bye. Robert Saleh, who's the coach of the Jets, coached with DeMeco Ryans in San Francisco. He's one of his mentors. They still talk to this day. Was it a system thing? Was it a bodies thing? Did they just think it was an overwhelming offer? I don't know, but giving up on someone that soon is something that raises an eyebrow, especially when it's someone that's as close to the head coach of the Texans in DeMeco Ryans. Number 3, I think a lot of people thought number 3. I think a lot of people have kind of conditioned themselves to maybe romanticize Jacob Martin. A, because he was a pivotal piece in the Jadeveon Clowney trade, and B, that I think there was a lot of people who had a distaste for Jadeveon Clowney, and they were trying to validate the trade that made no sense when O'Brien made it. They should have just brought Clowney back on the franchise tag, but Jacob Martin, along with Markevius Mingo and the draft pick, were traded for Clowney. So people who maybe had a distaste for Clowney are people who are trying to validate the hell that we knew we were heading towards with King Bill and the POS, Jack Easterby, making moves. I think Jacob Martin kind of got a little bit over romanticized because people were trying to justify that. Thought 4, how does he fit here? Are we talking about a 4th DN with Winovich and other guys? Is he competing with Winovich and Rivers? Is special teams going to be his key to making the team? How does Jacob Martin fit here? I think that's another question. What's his role going to be? And furthermore, is he even going to make the team? You got to think that there can be some other opportunities with guys on the streets that are of the same caliber player as Jacob Martin. How does he fit here? What are the Texans going to do? How do they look at him? I will say this about Jacob Martin. If he is just a camp body, he's a very, very good example in practice. I've watched him practice many times, works his ass off. And if you want the young guys to look to someone to see, how to give effort in practice, maybe he's that. Thought number 5, the bits. The bits are a lot. The Rock Boys bit was perhaps my least favorite bit in the history of the Houston Texans. We actually talked about it the other day in the locker room. I saw Jacob Martin, a listener, a viewer. By the way, subscribe, like, appreciate everyone for coming through. A listener, viewer sent me his Instagram where I guess he's already doing the Rock Boy thing. We got to let that go. Those were not fond memories for a lot of people. Quite frankly, that was the downward beginning of the end for the Houston Texans, not getting max value at the time for Clowney, or not getting Clowney on the field, and having to see Whitney Merciless do that along with Scarlett and Mingo. I hope to God that the Rock Boys bit is dead. If you want to be a Rock Boy solo act, cool, but let's not do the Rock Boys. There's too many young, appealing guys on this roster. I don't need to see that. Imagine Will Anderson joining the Rock Boys. We don't need to see that. So hopefully that bit is gone. It was exhausting. I would encourage not encouraging that type of nonsense. Just not a fan. Different strokes for different folks. Maybe you love the Rock Boys. God bless you if you did. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Subscribe, like, no matter what happens, whether the Rock Boys are dead, whether they're alive. When it comes to this Texans game, in this Texans digital game, daily, we are all in this together.
Top 2 and we not too plugged in daily digital on YouTube.